Imagine waking up in Los Angeles on a warm summer morning. The sky is the color of faded denim, but instead of the usual hum of city life, you hear the rumble of military vehicles echoing down palm-lined boulevards. Helicopters slice through the air overhead. Residents peek anxiously through curtains, watching as armored convoys wind their way through neighborhoods from Boyle Heights to Santa Monica. News alerts ping on every phone. Social media is ablaze with images and rumors. But this is no ordinary protest. This is a tipping point, not just for Los Angeles, but for the entire nation. What if the story you're hearing isn't the whole truth? What if the chaos is being amplified, twisted, and weaponized by powerful interests? Today, we peel back the layers to uncover the hidden forces driving the most explosive showdown in recent American history, a struggle that could redefine the boundaries of democracy itself. To understand how Los Angeles became the epicenter of a national crisis, we need to rewind the clock. The city has always been a flashpoint for social movements, a crucible where cultural, economic, and political forces collide. Think back to the immigration marches of the 1990s, when hundreds of thousands poured into downtown streets demanding justice after California's Proposition 187 threatened to deny public services to undocumented immigrants. Recall the Rodney King verdict in 1992, which ignited the largest urban unrest in modern U.S. history. Fast forward to the Black Lives Matter uprisings of 2020, when millions across the country demanded an end to systemic racism and police violence. Each of these moments forced leaders to confront deep questions of identity, power, and justice. But something about the current standoff feels different, more volatile, more uncertain, and more dangerous. The spark this time? A series of controversial Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or IC, raids in early 2025. The federal government, under President Donald Trump, launched a sweeping crackdown targeting so-called sanctuary cities, with Los Angeles at the top of the list. The raids, according to administration officials, aimed to root out undocumented immigrants and restore law and order. But for many Angelenos, the real motive seemed clear: to intimidate immigrant communities and send a political message in an election year. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tens of thousands took to the streets, waving banners, chanting in English and Spanish, and linking arms in peaceful defiance. The protests quickly spread from MacArthur Park to the Civic Center, and then to communities in East LA, South Central, and beyond. Local leaders, faith groups, and civil rights organizations mobilized to provide legal support and sanctuary. But as the crowds grew, so did the backlash. President Trump seized the moment. During a fiery speech at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, delivered on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, he cast the protests as an existential threat. He denounced demonstrators as animals, accused them of being a foreign enemy, and vowed to liberate Los Angeles. He painted a vivid picture of a city on the brink, bricks supposedly planted for violence, entire neighborhoods under criminal control, and protesters waving foreign flags as part of an invasion. Trump's words were echoed by advisors Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem, who amplified the message across every media platform. Social networks exploded with viral conspiracy theories. Sensational videos, often spliced together from unrelated sources, spread like wildfire, feeding public fears and muddying the facts. But was this narrative real? Almost immediately, investigative journalists and independent researchers dug in. Those viral bricks? Local reporters found that they belonged to nearby construction sites, not shadowy provocateurs. The dramatic footage of organized rioters? It was traced back to promotional videos from a building supply company in Malaysia, thousands of miles from Los Angeles. And the supposed invasion by foreign nationals? Experts like Raul Hinojosa Ojeda, professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, explained that the Mexican flag has long been a symbol of ethnic pride and immigrant solidarity in U.S. demonstrations. Every single demonstration of this type brings out the Mexican flag, he noted, adding that most protesters are, in fact, American citizens. Former Mexican Foreign Minister Jorge Castañeda agreed, pointing out that it would be reckless and foolish for non-citizens to risk arrest by participating openly. Despite these facts, the drumbeat of misinformation only grew louder. False narratives fanned the flames of outrage, fueling demands for federal intervention. By early June, authorities had arrested at least 378 people during the protests. Governor Gavin Newsom's legal team scrambled to challenge what he called the illegal and immoral deployment of the National Guard, ordered by the president without the state's consent. The financial cost of this federal incursion is staggering. Estimates top $134 million and are climbing daily. draining resources from city budgets already stretched by housing and public health crises. But the real price may not be measured in dollars. The American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California warns that the president's actions threaten a dangerous precedent: the erosion of civil liberties and the unchecked expansion of executive power. As Hina Shamsi of the ACLU National Security Project cautions, domestic military deployment raises profound dangers for our democracy. The Los Angeles Police Department, led by Chief Jim McDonnell, reports operational chaos as federal agencies roll in without coordination, sometimes even targeting the same communities as local officers. The city's Innovative Crises Act, which aimed to improve mental health responses and reduce reliance on armed police, has been overshadowed by this new era of militarized crackdowns. Beneath the headlines lies a deeper, more troubling reality. The racial wealth gap in Los Angeles is among the widest in the country. Black and Latino families have, on average, a fraction of the wealth of white households. Economic inequality feeds resentment and mistrust, making communities more vulnerable to both unrest and political manipulation. At the same time, political polarization has reached historic highs. According to recent surveys, Americans today are more likely than at any point in the past 50 years to view members of the opposing political party as not just wrong, but dangerous. This climate of suspicion and fear creates fertile ground for misinformation to flourish. So, just how far will leaders go to assert control? Could these clashes in Los Angeles set new norms for presidential power, and at what cost? Legal battles are now raging in both state and federal courts. Governor Newsom, civil liberties groups, and city officials have filed multiple lawsuits challenging the president's authority to deploy the military without state approval. The American Civil Liberties Union is exploring every possible legal avenue, from invoking the Posse Comitatus Act, which restricts the use of federal troops in domestic law enforcement, to arguing violations of the First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. The stakes are enormous. If courts side with the administration, future presidents could claim virtually unlimited authority to send federal forces into any state, bypassing governors and legislatures alike. Legal scholars like Professor Gregory Magarian of Washington University warn that such a precedent could hollow out the very rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. The Insurrection Act, which dates back to the early 19th century, was intended as a last resort for truly dire emergencies, not as a routine tool for handling civil unrest. Expanding its use now could permanently shift the balance of power between states and Washington, D.C. On the other hand, if courts restrain executive overreach, new legal doctrines may emerge, ones that reinforce state autonomy and clarify the limits of federal intervention. Attorney Robert Patillo, a passionate civil rights advocate, argues that militarizing civilian protests is a direct violation of the First Amendment. The outcome of these cases will not just shape the future of protest in Los Angeles, it will set the rules for every city and state in America. But the consequences are not just legal or financial, they are deeply social and psychological. Public trust in government institutions is already fragile. According to a recent Pew Research Center poll, fewer than 1 in 4 Americans say they trust the federal government to do what is right most of the time. Every escalation, every viral rumor, and every perceived abuse of power risks deepening the country's divisions. Social media platforms, while invaluable for real-time updates, also act as accelerants for conspiracy theories and fake news. As the Social Media Lab at Toronto Metropolitan University notes, the pallets of bricks hoax reappears with every protest, feeding right-wing influencers eager to capitalize on fear and outrage. The risk is clear. Future administrations of any political persuasion may be tempted to invoke the specter of outside agitators or national emergencies as justification for extraordinary actions, especially in an era of hyperpolarization. Legal experts warn that this cycle could become self-perpetuating. More unrest leads to more militarized crackdowns, which in turn breed more distrust and resistance, fueling another round of protests. But these turbulent events in Los Angeles also offer practical lessons for all Americans. First and foremost, they remind us of the power and fragility of civil liberties. Knowing your rights, especially the right to peacefully assemble and speak freely, has never been more essential. When officials make shocking claims, or when viral videos spread online, a healthy dose of skepticism can make all the difference. Fact-checking information, following reputable news sources, and supporting organizations that defend civil rights are not just good habits, they are acts of civic responsibility. We can also draw inspiration from the legal advocates on the ground. Groups like the ACLU are not only challenging executive actions in court, but also working to educate communities about their rights, provide legal support for those arrested, and foster dialogue between law enforcement and demonstrators. Community organizations, ranging from immigrant rights groups to faith-based coalitions, are offering safe spaces, mental health resources, and Know Your Rights workshops. In many neighborhoods, residents are banding together to document police actions and provide mutual aid, demonstrating that resilience and solidarity persist even in the face of adversity. For viewers wondering how to make a difference, the answer is both simple and urgent. Get involved. Volunteer with local organizations. Stay informed about your rights and current events. Speak up at city council meetings or through letters to elected officials. Vote in every election, from school board to president. Support independent journalism that holds power to account. These may seem like small actions, but history shows that the arc of American democracy is bent by millions of ordinary people insisting on being heard. What will be the lasting impact of these legal fights and mounting tensions? The answer depends on choices made not just in courtrooms and legislatures, but in living rooms and community centers across America. If the normalization of military deployments becomes routine, civil liberties could shrink dramatically under the banner of security. But if the legal system holds firm, and if public vigilance remains high, we may see new safeguards emerge, reaffirming the right to protest, setting clearer limits on executive power, and restoring checks and balances that have defined the American experiment for more than 2 centuries. Here's a little-known fact. Historians have documented that nearly every major expansion, or contraction, of protest rights in the United States was driven not just by top-down rulings, but by bottom-up activism. The labor strikes of the early 20th century, the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, the anti-war protests of the Vietnam era. All of these moments reshaped the country because ordinary people refused to accept the status quo. The story of Los Angeles is simply the latest chapter in this ongoing struggle. As we close, remember that the events unfolding in Los Angeles are not isolated. They are a mirror reflecting the broader battles over truth, power, and identity playing out in every corner of the country. To stay ahead of the headlines and unpack the real economic and political forces shaping our future, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What rights do you think are most under threat today? Have you witnessed the impact of misinformation in your own community? Let's keep this conversation going, because the future of democracy is written, not by those who look away, but by those